You're listening to Positive Podcasts, positive voices from our communities.
I am John, 32 years old, and I came from a corporate field. I am my greatest critique. My thought of who I am, regardless of my status, is the one that only counts. I see self-stigma as how I look at myself, me being my greatest critique. Meaning, I look into myself, process the mistakes I committed, and identify the reasons why I committed them. Self-stigma is like looking at the mirror but seeing myself differently because of social exposure and means of bringing me up. It is an extension of how I look at myself, using the judgmental eyes, not only of the society, but also the eyes of those people who I fear of disappointing. When I knew my status, I was more concerned of how people, especially my family, would react, rather than getting concerned of my health. Because of the stigma against myself, I was not as passionate as before, and limiting my own actions, my way of thinking, and my way of living. Self-stigma took over my life. It pushed me to give up and succumb to death. However, managing self-stigma was not due to my own efforts. It was also a combined effort of people who mattered, including my family and friends, to understand HIV and follow up my status. Self-stigma took over because of uncertainties due to limited information. Education and information helped me and my family in overcoming the doubts and led me to the conclusion that I will survive. I am in a better situation now because I know my status. I was courageous because I got myself tested. I have this chance to protect myself against opportunistic infections. I was just so stupid all this time, being concerned how other people look at me and how society would judge me. Being a competitive person, I love putting things on structure. I love scheduling events, and apparently, I want to make sure that the schedule is followed. I know what I want and will always find a way to get it. This is very prevalent in my career, my personal life, and in my hobby as a scuba diver. It was my being competitive that drove me to always want things, situations, to be on my advantage. Thus, I look at HIV as very disabling. Though I was aware of HIV, nobody educated me in depth as to its entire spectrum. The only thing I knew was that HIV is a prelude to AIDS. I have friends who are strong advocates of HIV information drive. I even had a friend who was a PL-HIV. I sympathized with them, but the level of my concern was different. I had this notion that as long as I keep my activities safe, and that as long as it is not happening to me, I can just be there to listen. Be there to let them feel that nothing has changed. But I had to be very cautious when I share food with them, or even when I visit their house. All I know was that HIV was a disease. Yeah, I even took HIV as a disease. Being a competitive person, I love putting things in structure. I love scheduling events, and apparently, I want to make sure that the schedule is followed. I know what I want and will always find a way to get it. This is very prevalent in my career, my personal life, and in my hobby as a scuba diver. It was my being competitive that drove me always want things or situations to be on my advantage. Thus, I look at HIV as very disabling. Though I was aware of HIV, nobody educated me in depth as to its entire spectrum. The only thing I knew was that HIV is a prelude to AIDS. I have friends who were strong advocates of HIV information drive. I even had a friend who was a PLHIV. I sympathized with them, But the level of my concern was different. I had this notion that as long as I keep my activities safe, and that as long as it is not happening to me, I can be there to listen, be there to let them feel that nothing has changed. But I had to be very cautious when I share food with them, or even when I visit their house. All I know was that HIV was a disease. Yeah, I even took HIV as a disease. My family background has conditioned my mind to be very judgmental of things around me, including people's actions. I looked at HIV as something that is associated with people whose sexual preference is not as how the society call normal. It was my deep rooted conservative religious belief that brought the hardest prejudice on myself. You see, I was born and raised in a fundamentalist, conservative Christian family, and my sexual preference is a big deal, not only in the family, but in the community that we revolve in. And what more will be my case as a PLHIV? I looked at my situation as a doomed life. How can I even end up sharing my life to a partner now that I'm a PLHIV? I told myself that my choices are limited and that my life will never be the same. There were nights that I beat myself emotionally for getting into this type of situation. There were even times during the early part of my journey as a PLHIV that I would stare at my wall and ask myself, why? There were moments of despair, times of bitter loneliness that seemed to let me feel so alone. I am a corporate guy who sticks with my schedule. As such, I was exact and precise to take the tests every 6 months, even if I do not usually engage into risky sexual behavior. I also know who I am having sex with. When it came for my test results, the doctor's words came out like a buzzing sound. It was as if my system is rejecting the information that is given to me. I did not want that information. My parents at the time were in the US. I was all alone at home. I did not have the courage to tell my sister, who was in the same city that I was in. A lot of thoughts, complicated and incomprehensible thoughts, came rushing in. I did not know how to address them. I kept the entire test result to myself for the time. I told myself that might just be a mistake, that there is a chance that the confirmation might be back saying it is non-reactive. But when the pressure was too heavy, I decided to disclose my status to a friend. Surprisingly, she was with me. I felt her support when she gave me advice on my diet, stress levels, and workload. She understood me. There was no judgment. I also decided to disclose to my family and my sister. There was disappointment at first, but all came well. With my family's support and my siblings' assurance of being there for me, I started to see things in a different way. The physical healing can be handled by my ARVs, but the emotional and moral healing were gradual. The struggles were real. Going through the early stage of living with HIV is not a walk in the park, and I think this applies to life in general. But what made it meaningful and easy to accept is the fact that this is not the end of the road for all of us PLHIVs. I am thankful that I'm given the chance to know my status, that I am taking the ARVs, that I am coping well now. The things that equip me to cope is actually in talking to PLHIVs also, and understanding the scale of the epidemic through research and sessions with my doctor. Of course, my family's assurance that they will be there for me also helped me a lot. The early part of the medication is both for the physical and emotional healing to work hand in hand. I remember there was this one night, early weeks of the medication, that I can't stand the effects of my ARVs. And I told my brother that I don't want to take the meds anymore and just accept the fate that I will die soon. I can remember his exact lines that time. Remember Napoleon's words. What your mind can conceive, your body can achieve. Bato lang. Just continue to fight. He knew that appealing to my religious stand at that time won't work, and he dealt with me without any tinge of pity. That, I think, made a strong impact on how I look at my status. Life is an opportunity to grab. It is a gift to appreciate. It is only with my being a PLHIV that I appreciated the things that happened and will happen in my life. In my own little way, I would like to tell people living with HIV that the battle is just starting. Until we get the consciousness of the people around us, until we get people to openly talk about HIV, this infection will sweep away some of our friends, even our family members, from the life which can be well lived just because they are scared to get themselves tested. This is seen now, even in my own circle of friends. They let the prejudices of society eat them up, then putting themselves through their health on top of things. It starts and ends within all of us. As for me, and I say this to my fellow PLHIVs, health should be the priority. Do not think of how people will look at you. You are your own greatest critique. Be kind to yourself. Love yourself.
You're listening to AppCom Online. For more information about AppCom or positive podcasts, visit appcom.org.